Ladies and gentlemen, Vice Chair, Korn Ferry International, Ms. Kristin Mannion.
Welcome, everyone. I see many friends in the audience, and I want to thank you, and I'm hoping that those friends will keep the rest of you awake and lively through this discussion. I want to thank His Excellency, Governor Abdulatif Othman, His Royal Highness, Prince Saud, and the entire Sagia team. This has been an amazing few days, and it has been an expression of innovation, I know, in many ways. Excuse me. I'm very pleased to be here in the kingdom with this distinguished panel to address the very important pieces of competition, human talent, and innovation. I want to quickly introduce my fellow panelists. We have Peter Olson, the CEO of Fullbridge. We have Ms. Huda, who is the Executive Director of Human Resources at Saudi Aramco. We have David Harmon, who's the Vice President of Global Affairs at Huawei. And we have Anshu Vats, who is the head of the Middle East Public Sector Consulting for Oliver Wyman. So how do we bridge skills and innovation? We all know that now is an opportunity to do that, and it's an opportunity that we have to grasp. We know it's about collaboration, and we know that advances in technology, and we know that cultural understandings are going to bring higher expectation for all of us as participants. The kingdom's demographics, I understand, suggest that by 2030, there are going to be 10 million new working age Saudis entering the labor market. We must therefore now address and act on the need for very intentional and very deliberate institutional infrastructure to foster innovation. Sometimes those words seem like they don't go together: intentional, deliberate, and innovation. But in fact, we believe they do. Talent is what brings ideas to life. At Korn Ferry Hay Group, where I am lucky to be employed, we are the preeminent global people and organizational advisory firm, and at the heart of what we do, in the heart of our business, is to deliver expert talent consultation to help leaders, organizations, and governments develop the full power and potential of its people. Now, our research recognizes, as it was mentioned earlier, that professional development is a lifelong continuum. Each and every one of us has this potential to continue to grow throughout our lives. The secret is none of us are ever really fully formed, and if we are, we're probably quite boring. Life is a lot more interesting if we're willing to be open to new ideas. I think our obligation is not to tell people what to know. I think rather it is to help people know how to learn. And innovation is now more essential than ever in that regard. Larry Page, Google's CEO, summed it up in a question: how do we create a healthy disregard for the impossible? So today, as we look at ourselves and we look at our people, beyond what we already know, I can tell you that at Korn Ferry, our research suggests several things, certain attributes that are found in the most successful innovators. Innovators are curious. They're naturally inquisitive. They always ask how and why. They are comfortable with ambiguity. This is an important thing. They are comfortable with ambiguity. They are comfortable in assuming risk, and often they assume that risk with less information rather than more information. And we know that organizations and governments and institutions, corporations, also have obligations and have certain tenets that must be present if we are really to create innovators. We must give each person a fundamental academic learning. We've heard a lot about education. We've touched on how it starts not just in school, but starts at the family. We have to provide them experience. Each one of our students, each one of us, we have to provide them experience and the opportunity to engage that experience in an exercise where they are challenged. And importantly, we must create collaborative environments. We have to promote teamwork and trusting environments where people know that they can take risks without being judged too negatively. And perhaps most importantly, and something we've all talked about today, but I'm not sure we can ever talk enough about, we must have an embracing of diversity and of differences, because it is that hug that's going to foster the ideas and growth. And even though sometimes that diversity will introduce disruption to status quo, it is also that diversity that presents the greater idea and the greater opportunity in the long run. So today, each one of our panelists here have a perspective on how do we create that innovation? How do we really foster that collaboration? How do we really create those cultures? And how do we develop individuals from birth all the way through to our final days? So let me start, if I might, start with you, Anshu, and I'd love for you to address a little bit about, you've been working in the kingdom now for many years and in around the educational system. And I'd love for you to maybe give us a sense of what you find and what you've seen in the academic learning continuum that remains essential as underpinnings for success, but also as the key components that have to be integrated into this traditional, conventional educational systems that will create innovators.
Thanks, Kristin. If we talk about education, first thing, I think the topic is such an open topic. Innovation doesn't happen in a bubble. Education doesn't happen in a bubble. It's part of a broader ecosystem of which industry is a component, society is a component, and all of them need to work together to create innovation and the intellectual curiosity that we want to breed into our students. Just coming to the kingdom and its track record, I think the most impressive track record in terms of creating access for students. We have gone from 5 universities to 25 in the last 15 years. We have enrollment of 56% now. We are generating 220,000 graduates which are entering workforce every year. So a very impressive track record in terms of creating access. The challenge that we now face is threefold. One, instead of getting hung up about curriculum, because no curriculum is perfect, the challenge that we face at the moment is there is no aspiration. We have failed to create new industries in the kingdom. Our 75% of our GDPs is still accounted for by 7 companies, large companies. They are not participating in the education system as well as they should be. And that coupling needs to happen first of all. Secondly, we need to create high-value industries in this kingdom. Because if we don't have those high-value jobs, there's nothing to aspire for. And the third element is, broadly speaking, we need to have a more integrated approach in terms of creating that lifelong curiosity for knowledge. And that requires more integrated approach rather than just thinking about higher education, primary education, and vocational training in separation.
Well, let me just ask, if I might, to the panel at large, but 2 questions. One is, how much of this skills issue in terms of gap, how much of this skills issue can be learned in a classroom? And how much of these skills are experiential? And how do we integrate that in? Peter, I don't know if you want to jump in here a little bit around that.
I think that the skills that the young generation really needs now are practical, experiential skills. If the educational system develops a base of literacy, numeracy, curiosity, and doesn't stifle creativity, they're doing their job. What we need in addition are modular programs that focus on very practical skills, in effect, a stern dose of reality.
So how do you see that being accomplished? I know at Fullbridge you do a lot of this work. Could you give us some examples of the kinds of simulation or modularity that you employ?
Well, one of the keys that we've found in engaging young people, and I would say that the real challenge here is motivation, and on the other side, boredom, because many students are bored in educational institutions. I was, my 7 children were, students around the world tend to be bored. The key is, and you touched on this, collaborative learning, teamwork, a judicious application of technology so that the content and the experience is interesting, and then above all, role models who are instructors, coaches, people from the practical world, so that students and graduates can see someone and see a path that they can emulate going forward.
In the States, we refer a lot of this role modeling to a term that we call mentoring, which has become a very progressive and very constant program, both in corporations, institutions, and in academic learning. I want to turn to Huda here for a minute and ask you from an institutional point of view, from Saudi Aramco's point of view, how much of that do you integrate into your learning course as students are coming in, and what kinds of programs and what kinds of training programs have you really developed to help close that gap of skills and innovative thinkers?
Thank you, Kristin, and also thank you again for giving me this opportunity to participate in this panel and share Saudi Aramco's experience in this area. Our investment in talent development has three components. The first component is to ensure that we have a strategic HR function with a dynamic HR strategy that has a vision of creating a people advantage for the company. People advantage is supported, of course, by a competitive employment value proposition, and also is supported by a sophisticated workforce planning model. The model helps us assess our talent supply and demand and forecast the skills gap 10, 20, 30 years into the future, and help organizations align their talent management strategies with the business strategy, and also allow us to appropriately allocate funds for talent development. This brings me to the second component, which is maintaining a long-term focus on developing people. Of course, the success in this area is basically related to long-term focus, because it takes time to produce competitive and competent individuals. Time to autonomy is different from industry to industry, but on average it ranges between 8 years to 15 years for young talent, fresh graduates to become productive part of the workforce. Now, we started our journey with talent development, investment in talent development with the inception of the company 80 years ago. At that time, Saudi Arabia was unlike Saudi Arabia of today. There was no technology, there were no schools, there were no skills. So to find oil and bring it to the market, we had to import not only the technology, but also the skills, and we had a choice. Do we continue depending on importing skills from abroad, or do we invest in upgrading the skills of our national resources? And we chose, of course, the latter. So what we did, we built schools, we built training centers, we enrolled our staff in internship programs with international companies and also in top management institutes. And we've been very successful. Our investment today in talent development reaches $1 billion annually. And over the years, we have realized fantastic and spectacular results as a return on our investment by ensuring that we have a solid pipeline of capable, innovative, high productive, and top performing employees. Of course, we didn't do it alone, and no company can do it alone. And this brings me to the third component of our talent investment programs. We did it in partnership, of course, with the education sector and with public and private companies. Our partnership goes with the education sector goes, way back. And this partnership is not only to ensure that we have people who can join us who are productive and skilled labor, but also to benefit the community and the economy at large. So we instituted 4 programs with the education sector. The first program deals with students, ensuring that they have strong, solid backgrounds in STEM studies, STEM disciplines, English language. They have a broad cultural horizon, and also to talk about the skills that are important for any successful performance of private companies, critical thinking, develop inquisitive minds, intellectual curiosity, and help them really participate in the major projects in the community, not to be confined only to their own disciplines. The second program targets teachers. We train teachers. We train them in new approaches of pedagogy and lesson delivery that are focused on a learner-centered approach. The third program is introducing technology in the classroom. We've worked with top institutes in the market, MIT is one of them, to introduce technology and blended learning in the classroom. And the fourth one is to basically review content, work with the education sector to look at preparatory programs for colleges, review contents, and also serve on the advisory boards of universities. So these three components together, having a dynamic and competitive HR strategy, long-term focus on training and development, and partnership with public and private sectors, have helped us ensure that we have a very strong pipeline of talent, and we build strong capabilities in the workforce and have the talent whenever we need them, wherever we need them, regardless of the ebbs and flows of the labor market or the cycles of the business environment.
Let's, if we could for a second, David, I want to turn to you and ask you a little bit about the institutional piece. At Huawei, you have exercised in a number of programs and taken, I think, both students and employees and brought them to China and around the world. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what those programs look like, why you've engaged in them, and also maybe spend some time from your perspective, you have a rather broad global perspective, on an institutional perspective on what kinds of cultures do you need to create within these institutions, and how do you do that?
Well, Kristin, from the perspective of Huawei Technologies and our relationship with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, as a company we have trained over 6,000 people, including employees from different government departments, teachers and students in a variety of ICT skills. Huawei supports the development of strong digital agenda programs in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and around the world. And one of our global programs is known as the Seeds for the Future program, where in fact last year we brought over 1,000 students from 60 different countries to come to China, learn about Chinese tradition and culture, and then come to our headquarters in Shenzhen to learn about how Huawei as a company develops our business and drives our carrier enterprise and consumer divisions. So Huawei as a company takes our corporate social responsibilities very seriously, and we support strongly the rollout of digital agenda programs all over the world. That said, you asked about the structures that should be put in place by governments in general that want to enhance ICT innovation programs. If I could use the phrase that it's very important to get the first lines of the maths equation correct if regions and governments want to develop innovative ecosystems. It is an accepted statistic that governments that increase spending by 20% in ICT can deliver a 1% increase in GNP. However, that can only be achieved if there is a very clear strategic approach. I mean, no region, no government can be a specialist in all ICT areas covering all economic sectors. In fact, when I used to work in the European Union, the EU member states operated a policy called smart specialisation, whereby regions and governments in Europe were focusing ICT innovation practices in sectors where they had a strong history and where they knew that they could develop and they had strong understanding. So some countries and regions were developing the agriculture sectors, others were developing the industrial environmental sectors, others were developing the transport and health sectors. So for example, it's only right that here in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia that there are strong advancements in the field of ICT for the energy sector. But one point I would like to emphasize is, no matter what goal somebody has in terms of delivering on ICT, policy. For example, if somebody wants to use ICT sensors to reduce traffic congestion by 25% in a city, you still need to put in place very strong governance, advisory, priority setting and a rule-based approach to deliver upon your ICT goals. In other words, delivering on ICT is only one half of the equation, so to speak. There is another half of the equation, namely putting in the structure to deliver that, and that includes engaging with the best talent, supporting international collaboration, and it's in that spirit of determination and with a clear strategic focus that strong economic dividends can be delivered. But they are not delivered overnight. It does take some time.
So let me pose a question, and let me also ask the audience, if you have questions, we would love to take them. There should be an email address someplace behind us. I don't see it, but you may soon. If not, we'll take questions directly from the audience. But let me just ask a question to my panelists here, and please feel free, any one of you, to jump in. But as we sit here, all of us trying to imagine what do we bring back to our children, to ourselves, what's the strongest and the best accelerator for an individual to really turn themselves into being innovative? I mean, in today's workforce, across all the sectors, if you each had to come up with one or two things that you thought was something that would really accelerate our ability to be better at it, what would it be?
I would start and end with one key factor, which is confidence. All the practical skills and learning that a future entrepreneur needs can be conveyed in programs, but there's no substitute for real experience. And an innovator needs to be aware that they are facing in the entrepreneurial world challenges that are very different from school. If we can convey to them that sense of confidence, that they can take an idea, that they can face challenges and adversity, that it's okay to fail, that they are willing to undergo the ups and downs of the entrepreneurial world, then we've really given them a base to take their creativity and move into the world of entrepreneurship.
Now, I know I asked all of you, but I just want to dash 1 second to Huda, because doesn't this come a little bit, Huda, to the program that you've instituted in part for the women innovators and some of the women employees that you have at Saudi Aramco? Have there been some programs around this issue and other kinds of issues for them?
Our initiatives with the women, actually, maybe many of the audience don't know this, but started more than 50 years ago. The first Saudi woman was hired in 1964. And since then, we made sure that all our programs are inclusive, gender neutral, and also conducive to work-life balance in order to encourage women to join us, to join the industry. We have 10 initiatives. I'm not going to go over all of them, but 4 of those initiatives are meant for as an outreach program for the community, to work with universities. We work with 14 female universities and high school students to ignite passion in science and engineering, and others to provide financial support for women who are entrepreneurship and they want to start their small and medium-sized businesses. Now, for our own female employees, we have 6 programs, but the main 2 that I would like to talk about is one, offering scholarships for women. We take them from high school. They spend 1 year with us as a preparatory year, and then we send them to universities all over the world, from the US to Japan and anything in between, to study science and engineering and disciplines that we need in our business, and also provide them with advanced degrees, masters and PhDs. The second program is coaching and mentoring. We spend a lot of time in coaching and mentoring, not only females, but also, our male employees. And the programs that we have for development, basically we call them 10, 20, and 70. 10% classroom to strengthen the fundamentals, 20% coaching in on the job and 70% experience. Cross-functional experiences are very important for development and for young talent to venture outside their own limited and narrow disciplines. So these are the programs that we have for women.
Can I just jump in to say that based on our experience in Saudi Arabia, we have found that working with female students to be immensely rewarding because they are tremendously motivated, hard workers, and even on a global basis, very strong learners. So it's an impressive group that you work with.
Thank you very much.
Anshu, I know you wanted to jump in there.
Very true. Well observed. I just wanted to comment on earlier, you asked about how do you create innovation in culture. And the question that I keep asking myself is, where is the next, Google going to come from? Where's the next disruption going to come from? Where's the next Zuckerberg is going to come from? And how do we make sure it comes from Saudi Arabia? And the challenge that I see at the moment is we really need to focus on industries of the future, not so much industries of the past. They are there. We participate in those value chains, but the new industries is where we can invest and capture. Because until we create opportunities for the youth, and until we give them aspirations that are achievable, it is hard to be motivated and innovative. And that's where I think we have the wherewithal, we have the willpower to direct our efforts and make sure that we are focusing on the future industries that are emerging, such as advanced manufacturing, nanotechnology, etc. And we are localizing that value chain over here so that the young people who are graduating out of the university, regardless of which track they come from, regardless of whether they're coming from humanities or STEM, I don't get hung up about those tracks too much. As long as they're coming with intellectual curiosity that they can pursue to a profitable end for themselves and to the community, we will all come out a winner.
In fact, Kristin, I'd say to you that today there are 10 billion connections in the world. By 2025, there's going to be a minimum of 100 billion connections in the world. So that's a further 90 billion connections, not only person to person, person to thing, things to things. So an awful lot of new business models are going to be generated out of these new advancements in the field of ICT. I would just like to say that there has been some comment about accelerator programs, and it is very important that young entrepreneurs that engage in accelerator programs are given strong mentoring advice, as Huda mentioned previously, and also that governments in general put in place structures that are as least bureaucratic as possible, if I can use that phrase, to allow the development of new ideas and creative concepts to move forward.
Thank you. I'm going to invite, I don't know if anyone in the audience has a question. If not yet, what I'd like you to maybe think about, and maybe some of the younger people in the audience, to think about how you'd answer that same question in your mind, in your pursuits. What is the one or two things that would really accelerate your own careers and really sort of turn you in a way, something that you've either not been able to find or something you wish you could find, and maybe as a result of this panel we can help you find that. I'm wondering if I turn the question around while we maybe have some people think out there, in terms of the greatest impediments to innovation, and again I'd ask you to think as the individual as well as the institution. Peter, what would you say when you have worked in the kingdom or globally? What are those barriers? I mean, what do they really? I know we talked about confidence, but
I think if you look at this young generation globally, and I believe that applies here as well, we have a uniquely talented, in terms of technical skills, group of people. We have perhaps uniquely creative young people, but we also have young people who are tremendously confused about the future and extraordinarily distracted. And to the extent that we can help build in them a sense of focus, of purpose, of confidence in what they're doing, that can go a long way. And I think that lack of confidence is the biggest impediment for entrepreneurs of any age in starting a business. Fear of failure.
I think two things. First, let me just tackle the education system. The education system does not encourage innovation or creativity. The mismatch between the output of the education system and the need of the industry will continue to exist even with current reforms. And I don't want to discourage our partners in the education sector, but the reason I say that, there are two reasons. One, the process of reform is very, very slow and will be unable to catch up with the demand of the industry and the changes in the future jobs. These changes are driven by technology, by shifts in demographics, by socio-economic environment. And those who graduate from the system today, after 16 and 20 years of spending time in the education system, half of their knowledge will be obsolete and outdated. Actually, a research by the World Economic Forum, recent research, showed that 60% of those who enter the primary school today will be working in jobs that don't exist today. The second reason, the education system provides very highly siloed training and is based on a number of outdated 19th century structures that produce very narrow specialization. Now, if you have young talent coming out of the education system with very narrow specialization, they will struggle to connect their own technical fields with the outside world. They will be unable to think creatively about the impact of their own work on the outside environment. They will not be able to connect the dots and see the big picture. There is no pattern recognition, there is no logical reasoning, there is no critical thinking. And of course, because of the narrow specialization, they lose social skills. And by social skills, I mean working in effective teams and having the art of negotiation and persuasion.
Go ahead, David.
I would just say to you that there's always the ongoing challenge to ensure a higher level of private sector involvement in research, innovation and science activities, and leverage higher levels of support through the banking system to support young innovators. And because the private sector itself can't fill the gap to support the initial stage of new novel ideas emanating from incubator or accelerator programs, that is why it's so important that governments do support incubator and accelerator programs around the world in a very focused manner.
I'll just pick on one point because I do work with education sector and I constantly get hammered by everyone, including our industry, about the mismatch between our output and the industry demand. Let me just say one thing. Steve Jobs studied calligraphy. There was no demand for calligraphy at that time. And that's how innovation comes. So I've never gotten hung up about whether people are coming out of humanities or whether they're coming out of the STEM. Innovation comes from that heterogeneity or diversity of the skills. What we need is a stage where they are able to exercise their creative thinking, their innovative thinking, and create something new. So I'll stop there. I noticed the time is running out.
Yeah, I think we have run out of time. So if you do have questions, I would encourage you to continue to email them to us, and we can certainly get you answers. I want to thank you all. I think what we heard here today is, again, daunting, but possible. And I think that that's what we all have to hold on to, is the enthusiasm to really, as we were reminded before, to question the impossible. Because if collectively and collaboratively we can have these discussions and we can actually come up with ideas and solutions, and we can then, as our McKinsey colleague earlier said, deliver and execute on those ideas, we can all get there, and we can get there together, and it would be a wonderful experience. So Thank you all for staying, and thank you for being with us, and we look forward to more collaborative moments.